WNBA media members as out of touch and inherently sexist, racist, and misogynistic. That was in response to the question recently presented to Azzi Fudd, who was taken number 1 overall in the WNBA draft, when asked about her dating status. Fudd is in a relationship with Dallas Wings teammate Paige Beckers. Rapinoe said she didn't have a problem with Kevin Sherrington, a white columnist from the Dallas Morning News, asking Fudd about the relationship, but at the same time, she called on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Let's establish the context here. The WNBA just experienced its biggest growth year in league history. Caitlin Clark's arrival brought mainstream sports fans who'd never watched a single game before. Viewership jumped 170% on ESPN compared to 2023. The league finally crossed over from niche audience to legitimate sports conversation. And Rapinoe's diagnosis of why this happened? She credits it to the league being rooted in black and queer culture. Not the basketball, not the competition, not a generational talent that casual fans actually wanted to watch. The culture.
You know how many NBA fans I actually see dogging out the WNBA? They can't even, a lot of those guys can't even watch it. They finally crossed over. And they got a star, a superstar, big enough to draw your attention. But what you find out when you start watching this league is, oh my God, it's full of radicals.
Here's what actually triggered this entire manifesto. Kevin Sherrington, a columnist from the Dallas Morning News, asked Azzi Fudd during draft media availability about her relationship with teammate Paige Beckers. Both players had been public about their relationship on social media. It was documented, acknowledged, not hidden. Sherrington asked a standard sports journalism question: could playing with your romantic partner create complications? In the NFL, MLB, or NBA, you don't worry about teammates dating each other because it's not a factor. But when Dallas uses a top draft pick on someone in a relationship with another player on the roster, that's a legitimate team dynamics question.
DEI to be used to rebuild the WNBA media corps. I'm dead. I'm dead. Quote, I do think we are watching legacy or establishment media come in and sort of like do business as usual, and it just feels like it needs more understanding and nuance. It was a valid question because in other sports, you do not have to worry or concern yourself with teammates.
And Rapinoe's response reveals everything about her worldview. She didn't have a problem with the question itself. She admitted it was valid. But then came the qualifier that exposes her real agenda. She said establishment media is covering the WNBA like it's the NBA, and it's not quite hitting. Translation: traditional sports journalism standards don't apply here. The normal rules of coverage need to be rewritten. Why? Because this league requires understanding and nuance that apparently only specific types of journalists can provide.
And if there is a problem and drama because they are bleeping each other, it can blow your whole team up. That's why the question gets asked. That's why the question is relevant. If there is drama, it can fry the entire team and the locker room, and you pissed away an asset.
Now watch this section carefully, because this is where she reveals the actual plan. Rapinoe's not calling for better trained sports journalists. She's calling for ideologically aligned media members. Quote, media members that can understand queer culture and that have an imagination around how to give these players media platforms that work for them. She wants PR teams, managers, and agents specifically selected to craft narratives. This isn't journalism anymore, this is advocacy. And she's explicitly stating that the current WNBA media, which is already the most politically progressive sports coverage in America, isn't progressive enough.
Time just sort of has that feeling of like, I get why you're doing that. You do that with men's sports, but it's not like really quite hitting here. What's the solution? Replace traditional media with woke media. Aren't they already woke? Can you imagine WNBA media getting more woke than they are now? It makes the media They look like clowns. The WNBA media covering the league right now look like clowns like it is. I watched Ben Daniels' video and the CDS that you got media members arguing because they don't understand the contracts that were given to Leah Boston and Asia Wilson. They don't even know how contracts works in sports. They don't even know how it works.
Let's address the elephant in the room that makes Rapinoe's entire position hypocritical. She's out here demanding protection for women's sports media while simultaneously advocating for biological males to compete in women's sports. After she retired from soccer, conveniently when she wouldn't have to face the consequences, she became one of the loudest voices supporting transgender athletes in women's competition. So when she talks about preserving what the WNBA has built and protecting the culture, understand that her version of protection includes policies that would fundamentally destroy competitive integrity. You can't champion women's sports while supporting the elimination of women's categories.
Craft, okay, that's my first problem. I had somebody tell me on Twitter a while back, well, this is women and you have to approach it differently. No, I won't, and I will not. I won't. That's called bias. I'm not doing that. It is not going to be handled any differently if I'm talking about the NFL or if I'm talking about the WNBA. I'm not handling it a bit differently. Quote, how do we collectively protect and craft the future of this space? Oh, these buzzwords.
Here's what she's really saying when she talks about safe spaces and player authenticity. She wants journalists who won't ask uncomfortable questions, who won't point out when activism interferes with basketball, who won't challenge narratives or provide critical analysis. She wants coverage that prioritizes identity over performance, politics over competition, messaging over journalism, and the irony is suffocating because WNBA media already does this. They already handle players with kid gloves compared to how male athletes get covered, and it's still not enough for Rapinoe.
Okay, you're a hypocrite. You literally want men in women's sports. You have been out there advocating, including just recently, for a dude to put a wig on and go out on court and start dunking on girls. So I don't want to hear you're advocating for women. You can shut your hypocritical ass up right now. Quote, how do we contribute to an ecosystem that can sustain player?
The timing of this push is critical. The WNBA just proved it can attract mainstream audiences when it focuses on basketball. When Caitlin Clark played, people tuned in to watch basketball talent, not cultural statements. Her games averaged 1.78 million viewers on ESPN networks. The league set attendance records in multiple cities, merchandise sales exploded, and all of that happened because casual sports fans finally had a reason to care about the product on the court. But Rapinoe sees this growth, and her concern isn't how do we build on this basketball success. It's how do we make sure the media covering this growth aligns with our ideology.
Yeah. I mean, look, WNBA media is the worst I've ever seen. But part of that is because they embrace things that have nothing to do with sports, and Megan Rapinoe wants that to get what? Worse. Even worse. Make it gayer. What's the Kathleen Kennedy meme from South Park? Put a chick in it, make it lame, and make it gay. Wow. Wow. Here we go.
Look at the actual WNBA media landscape right now. These aren't hardened investigative reporters asking tough questions. Multiple WNBA media members got into public arguments during the season because they didn't understand basic contract structures. When Aaliyah Boston and Aja Wilson signed extensions, journalists covering the league couldn't explain how Supermax contracts work. They don't understand salary cap mechanics. They don't grasp CBA provisions. But Rapinoe's diagnosis isn't that WNBA media needs more sports journalism expertise. It's that they need more understanding of queer culture. That's not a journalism qualification. That's an ideological litmus test.
Like it is. I watched Ben Daniels' video and the CDS that you got media members arguing because they don't understand the contracts that were given to Leah Boston and Asia Wilson. They don't even know how contracts works in sports. They don't even know how it works. Quote, how do we collectively...
Here's the fundamental problem with Rapinoe's entire framework. She wants the WNBA taken seriously as a professional sports league while simultaneously demanding it be covered differently than every other professional sports league. You can't have it both ways. Either you're a legitimate sports product that gets covered with the same scrutiny, critical analysis, and journalistic standards as the NBA, NFL, and MLB, or you're a niche cultural movement that requires special handling and ideologically aligned coverage. The mainstream sports audience that showed up for Caitlin Clark isn't interested in the latter. They want basketball coverage. They want analysis of plays, strategies, matchups, and performance. They don't want every story filtered through identity politics. And this gets to the core of why so many sports fans still don't take the WNBA seriously, even after the growth this season. It's not the quality of play. It's not the athlete's abilities. It's that the league and its most prominent advocates keep insisting that basketball is secondary to the cultural messaging. When your response to record-breaking viewership is we need to make sure the media covering us is queer enough, you're telling casual fans that the sport itself isn't the priority. Rapinoe talks about protecting what the WNBA has built, as if the league built this audience on its own. It didn't. For 27 years before Caitlin Clark, the WNBA averaged under 500,000 viewers per game. The league lost money every single season. It survived entirely on NBA subsidies. The culture Rapinoe credits didn't build a sustainable audience. One transcendent player who happened to be a straight white woman from Iowa did more for WNBA growth in one season than decades of the approach Rapinoe is advocating for. And here's what makes her position particularly galling. She's demanding that media members have imagination around how to give these players media platforms that work for them. That's not journalism. That's public relations. Journalists aren't supposed to give athletes platforms that work for them. They're supposed to report accurately, analyze critically, and ask questions that audiences want answered. The relationship between media and athletes is supposed to have tension. That's how you get honest coverage instead of propaganda. When Rapinoe says traditional media covering the WNBA like it's the NBA isn't hitting, what she means is that treating WNBA players like professional athletes with the same expectations and scrutiny as their male counterparts makes people uncomfortable. But that discomfort is necessary. That's what equality actually looks like. If you want equal pay arguments taken seriously, you have to accept equal media treatment. You don't get to demand NBA salaries while insisting on college softball media coverage. The Kevin Sherrington question about Ozzie Fudd's relationship was legitimate sports journalism. If two NFL players were in a relationship and got traded to the same team, that would be a story. If two MLB teammates were dating, that would be covered. It's not homophobic to ask how romantic relationships between teammates might affect team chemistry. It's basic sports reporting. But in Rapinoe's framework, asking that question reveals that you don't have enough understanding and nuance because you're applying normal sports journalism standards instead of special accommodations. This entire controversy exposes the contradiction at the heart of how activists want the WNBA covered. They want mainstream attention and mainstream revenue, but they want niche, protective, advocacy-style coverage. They want to be taken as seriously as men's professional sports, but they want to be treated more gently than men's professional sports. They want the benefits of being a major league without accepting the scrutiny that comes with being a major league. And the most frustrating part is that this approach actively undermines the growth the league just experienced. The fans who showed up for Caitlin Clark don't want to hear about queer culture and safe spaces and media members with the right ideological credentials. They want to hear about basketball. They want analysis of her shooting range, her passing vision, her impact on winning. When you make every story about identity instead of performance, you alienate the exact audience you just spent 27 years trying to attract. Rapinoe's vision for WNBA media isn't progress. It's regression. It's retreating back into the niche audience that kept the league on life support for decades. The growth happened when the focus shifted to basketball. Rapinoe wants to shift it back to activism. And if the league follows her advice, they'll watch that mainstream audience disappear as quickly as it arrived. So here's the question worth asking. Is Megan Rapinoe actually trying to help the WNBA, or is she trying to use the WNBA's moment of growth to push a broader cultural agenda? Because everything she's proposing would make the league less accessible to mainstream fans, not more. And maybe that's the point. Maybe sustainable business success is less important to her than ideological purity. But if that's the case, she should be honest about it, instead of pretending this is about protecting what the league has built. The WNBA has a choice to make. Chase the mainstream audience that finally showed up, or retreat back into the comfort zone of activist coverage and niche appeal. You can't do both. And based on Rapinoe's manifesto, she's already made her choice. The question is whether the league will be foolish enough to follow her down that path. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want more honest sports coverage without the ideological filters, and let's see if anyone in WNBA leadership has the backbone to push back on this nonsense.
And that have an imagination around how to give these players media platforms that work for them. Listen, WNBA, if you ever want to be considered a sustainable, viable, continuous, serious sport, you will quit giving a shit about who people sleep with. You will quit giving a damn. And you will quit promoting it and propping it up like these people are heroes for who they decide to sleep with. That does not make you a hero in society. I'm sorry. And I understand I will lose subscribers over this. I don't know why. God, Megan Rapinoe. Jeez. What? Guys, tell me in the comments section what you think. This is Megan Rapinoe is everything in and around the WNBA. She is the walking, talking example of everything wrong with this league and why so many people do not take it seriously.